Namaste, everyone. We at Advaita Academy welcome you all to the 1 month-long Oneness Festival, a global celebration of Adi Shankaracharya Ji, which is almost coming to an end. In this session, we have a live talk by Sri Eddie Stern Ji on a New Yorker's take on oneness, Bhakti, Pooja, Yoga. It's followed by a Q&A. After that, we have a dance video on exploration through Abhinaya of Adi Shankaraji's verses by Pujita Krishna, and a music video after that by Srimati Pramodini Rauji. All in one in all. And for the new attendees, we have 4 different sessions every day, 2 in the morning, 6 a.m. IST, and 2 in the evening, 6:30 p.m. IST. Eddie Stern Ji is an Ashtanga yoga teacher, engaging in multidisciplinary approach to furthering understanding, research, collaboration, education and access to yoga through technology and scientific research, and encouraging diversity in all aspects of his work. He studies philosophy, Sanskritam, ritual, science, and religion, and has a great love for music and art, which all play a big role in his teaching of yoga. He learned yoga from Sri K. Pattabhi Jois Ji for 19 years and also learned ritual and chanting. You may please type in your questions and comments in the chat box below for Eddie Ji, and he'll take them after his talk. And I now welcome Sri Eddie Stern Ji to please take the floor. Welcome, Eddie Ji.
Thank you so much, Kavita, for having me, and to Ravi Ji and everyone at the Oneness Festival. It's an amazing thing that you guys are doing for the entire month.
Thank you so much. Eddie Ji, first off, I'd like to start by telling everybody, in case they didn't know you already, that you have this very beautiful Broome Street temple that I've been to in Manhattan. Can you please tell us how that came about? So it's a Ganesha temple, and I've been there. And people do yoga there and also do puja. Is that how it goes? Or?
Yeah, definitely. So first we'll say a short little prayer.
Yes.
Om Shri Guru Bhyo Namaha Harihi Om Shankaram Shankaracharyam Keshavam Bhadarayanaha Sutra Bhasha Krata Vande Bhagavantah Punah Punaha Akhanda Mandalakaram Vyaptam Yena Characharam Tat Padam Darshitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. So, how did we come about to having a temple in New York? It's a, sort of a long roundabout story. I started practicing yoga when I was about 18 years old in New York, where I'm from, in Manhattan. And back then, yoga was very much part of the subculture hippie scene. It wasn't a fitness regime like it is now. And it was very much considered to be part of a spiritual quest. So you only came to yoga if you were looking for enlightenment. If you were looking for liberation, that's why you would come to do yoga in the 1970s and 80s. And so I was reading books by Ram Dass, Baba Ram Dass, and that was my main entryway into yoga. There was only a couple of yoga schools in New York. There was a Kundalini yoga school, there was the Shivananda yoga school, and Integral yoga, and Dharma Mitra, and then a newer school called GFO2020 had opened up. And I went to all of those schools and became fascinated about this inner quest, because I had been on a search in my teenage years, but I didn't know what it was that I was looking for. I just knew there was something missing in my life that I was seeking. And when I was 15, I had an English teacher named Mrs. Benditson, and we were reading Siddhartha by Hermann Hesse in her class. And she said to us, the 3 most important questions you can ask yourself in your life are, who am I? What am I doing here? And what do I do next? And I really was not a good student. I disliked being in school immensely. And this is the only thing I remember in high school. And when she said this, it was like a bell went off in my head, and I thought, yeah, who am I? And what is the meaning of all this? And so from that day forward, I really started this interior questioning about what was purposeful in my life, what was meaning for me. and who was the one who was looking for that meaning. So the person who I felt I was on that day, was I going to be that same person 50 years from now? And those were the kinds of thoughts that I was having. So when I found yoga, it gave me a container and a format for making the search that I was on somewhat formalized and disciplined. And that became everything that I wanted in my life. So when I was 20, I decided to go do a teacher training course in Kerala at the Shivananda Yoga Vedanta Dhanwantari Ashram, and bought my ticket, prepared myself. I had no idea anything about India. I didn't even know where I was going. All I knew was I was meeting the Swami on 24th Street, and we were going to go to India, and I was going to stay there for some time. So we arrived in India, in Mumbai, and then we went down to Kerala. I spent a month at the training. And then afterwards, I had made friends with a young Indian man there and a Western lady. And we decided to go on a temple yatra through South India. And that yatra ended up bringing us all through the major temples in Kerala, the major temples in Tamil Nadu, into Karnataka. And then we kept going, and we went all the way up towards Calcutta and then into Benares. And then from Benares, we took a bus ride up to the border of Nepal, then to Kathmandu, and then down again by bus to Delhi, and then to Rajasthan, to all the holy places we could go to in Rajasthan. All this was by bus and by train.
Wow.
And this was 1988, 89, and it took about four and a half months or so. Wow. And so what we would do was we would get to a temple, and we would stay in these small temple towns and the big temple towns like Madurai or Trichy or Sridangam or wherever we were going, Rameshwaram. We'd spend 3 days there. We'd find a quiet place in the temple, and we would roll out our bamboo yoga mats, which is what we had back then. There were no sticky mats.
Right.
And we would do our sadhana. We would do asanas and pranayama. We would chant, we would meditate, and we would seek out the holy places to do our practices in. And I didn't know anything about Hinduism. I had only just been introduced to Advaita Vedanta through the Swamis at Shivananda. And the yoga practices started coming to life for me in these temples. I would see all of the carvings and the deities, which were living divine presence that, I'd never seen anything like that, of course, in my life. I'd never seen a worship of these murtis before, with the abhisheka and the flowers and the malas and the deepa and the dhupa and everything, and the mantras, and I was captivated. My heart somehow was pulled, even though I didn't know what it was that I was seeing. And so through those months in the temples, yoga came alive for me. It didn't come alive for me so much like being in a yoga classroom or standing on my head. It came alive from the environment, from being in India and from being in these sacred places. And this little bit of a seed was planted in me that this is the environment that I wanted to do yoga in. And so that stayed with me. Then eventually I kept going back to India every year. In 1991, I met my guru, G. Pratapi Joyce in Mysore, and I spent 19 years going back and forth every year, once or twice a year, to study with him. My wife as well, and we would stay there for long periods of time. And during that time, I was able to learn from him how to do small rituals. I learned chanting of the Upanishads and of the Suktas from him, and from a Swamiji Yuktatmanandaji from RIMSI, Ramakrishna Institute for Spiritual and Moral Education, and Moral and Spiritual Education. And that was the chanting of mantras and the performance of ritual was reaching this part of myself that was an unseen part. It was this part of myself that, like asanas and pranayama, I could see what it was doing because I can see my body. I could see how my body was changing from breathing. But puja and ritual and the worshiping of the forms of the divine was addressing this unseen thing in me, this intangible thing that felt like was the essence of my being. And that became and still remains to be the most important practice for me. Maharishi Mahesh Yogi, and I learned this from Deepak Chopraji, spoke about how the deities or the devas and the mantras are invocations, and we're awakening these devas which exist within us. And of course, we know as above, so below, as in the cosmic egg, so in the individual egg. So the devas, which are the beings of light that uphold the cosmic order of the universe, also exist in the cosmic order of our bodies. And they are the subtle fields and the subtle forces that maintain order in this entire physiological mechanism, in the mental mechanism, the emotional mechanism, everything. And so by chanting the mantras, we're waking up these cosmic forces which are in us as an invocation to our true nature. And this became, a very powerful thing for me. And I thought all yoga leads for me towards this. It doesn't for everybody, but for me, this is what it was leading to. I learned from Guruji and also from the Acharya, the Pandit Ramachandra Atreya, who did the Prana Pratishtha of our temple, about how Shankaracharya approached worship of Brahman through form. So he spoke, as you know, and has been covered. I've seen a lot of the videos on your website, which are amazing. But there's the concept of Nirguna and Saguna Brahman. And the Nirguna Brahman is Brahman with no form beyond any conceptualization whatsoever. But it's hard for certain people most people in fact, to contemplate the formless, the nameless, the absolute, of which we are all entrapped, of course, in objects and names and forms. So for those who are not able to do that, then they can worship through the Brahman with form, which is Saguna. I remember very clearly one day standing on the steps of Pattabhi Joyce's house in Mysore, and we had just finished a chanting class with him, myself and his grandson Sharat and Sharatji. And he said to me, "You not understanding Jnana Kanda." Said, "You not understanding Jnana Kanda. But Karma Kanda possible, little bit of understanding you." And he repeated it twice. And I thought, okay, anytime he said something like that, I listened to him. I thought, okay, he's telling me straight out, I'm not going to understand the philosophical portion. That's okay. If I can get a little bit of understanding of Karma Kanda, then right on. I'm on the road right now. And maybe, next birth, I'll be born into circumstances where I can continue those studies or not. So I've made an effort over these years to continue studying Karma Kanda with this understanding that within the worship of Saguna Brahman, we have the Panchayatana Puja, the worship of the 5 deities. And these are Ganesha and Surya, Vishnu, Shiva, and Shakti, and Skanda as well sometimes. And so the worship of these deities is also my way of maintaining my connection not only to this sense of the divine, but also to the lineage that Pattabhi Joyce as a Smarta Brahman has come from. Mm-hmm. So it's still very much in line with his tradition, his lineage as well. I can take that little morsel of understanding that I could have and apply it in that way. I have Ganesha in the center of my Panchayatana Puja. And as you said, our temple in Broome Street was a Ganesha temple. In the Ganapati Atharvashirsha, we see that Ganesh is the manifestation of Tat Twamasi. He is Brahman made visible. So even in all of these different Upanishads, when we read through them, we see hints that, okay, yes, even though I'm visualizing the deity here of Ganesha, he's actually a manifestation of non-dual consciousness. He is beyond the 3 states of consciousness. He embodies the 4 levels of speech. He transcends, et cetera, et cetera. He's Brahma and Vishnu and Shiva and Surya and everything. So all of these hints of the beyond are contained within that. So in 1995, my wife and I opened our yoga school in Soho, and we built a small little Ganesha temple with a white marble Ganesh that we still have. And in 2000, that space, we lost it because a shopping chain called Crate and Barrel wanted to take over the first 2 floors of the building we were in. And our yoga school was coming right in the middle of where they wanted to put a staircase. And so we got kicked out of the building we were in. And one of my students had a building on Broome Street and convinced her husband to let us rented out for a yoga school. He was a very cynical towards yoga person, a very nice guy. He ended up being my landlord for over 20 years, and we're still very good friends. And now he does yoga with me as well. But in the beginning, he was like, a yoga school, you've got to be kidding me. He had just made a trip to Tibet. And so he had seen the temples of Tibet, and he thought, well, maybe this is good karma or something, you know, and it's good to have them here. So he let us move in, and we built it out. And I thought, maybe we should build a temple here. So the next year when we went to Mysore, I said to Guruji, could we have his permission to build a temple and do a prana pratishtha? And he said, yes. And I said, who should we install? Now, I had been mainly worshiping Anjaneya. I was more of a Raman Anjaneya Bhakta. And he said, you should install a Ganesha Murti. And I said, okay. And he told me which form we should get. He wanted us to get a Balamuri, a right-handed trunk Ganesha. And so we had the Shilpa Shastri in Mysore, Shivananda Shilpa Shastri, carved the deity for us. And then we had Anjaneya carved as well, and we had all of the brass Prabhavalis and everything made in Mysore. We had, I think, something like 800 kgs of stuff shipped to us in New York. And then Guruji had us made a yantra, a Ganapati yantra on a sheet of gold. And we brought 3 priests to New York, and we did a 10-day pratishtha, no, a 6-day pratishtha, right after the World Trade Centers collapsed. Oh. So the priests arrived in New York 10 days after the World Trade Centers came down. Okay. And we did purificatory rituals for all those who had lost their lives in this tragedy. And then after that, we began with the pratishtha for Ganapati. We worshipped that Ganesha for 15 years. And then our building was sold. And we could not rally the community together to help raise money to buy the floor that we were on. And we had to uninstall the deity and transfer the energy to a temporary deity, which our priest has in Queens and is worshiping. I have all the small deities that I'm worshiping. We had been in that school for 15 years, and we had built a beautiful school and a beautiful temple. When the school closed, I didn't mind. I was absolutely fine. I thought, no big deal. It's a yoga school. But when Ramachandra arrived from Australia, where he lives now, to help with the uninstalling of the deity, and Prakash Bhatt, who's our priest from Queens, we came, we did our ceremonies, all the homas and everything. When we started undoing the pratishtha, the 3 of us in the sanctum were bawling. We were crying. We were crying so much. It was, even now when I think of it, it's painful. It was so painful. It was just the saddest. I felt like an utter failure is the only way I can describe it. I felt like such a failure to the deity and to the vows I had made to maintain the pratishtha, and to the galvanizing of community that I couldn't get together. It was horrible. We then moved out to Brooklyn and tried to redo the temple there. The building we were in also belonged to my same landlord, but it was a bad location, and we just couldn't get it going. So then that's that. I'm still doing my puja every morning, and observing different vows of mantra upasanas, and waiting for the time when we reinstall or build a new temple. When I was in Rishikesh last year with Deepak Chopraji and a group of people, and my wife, of course, and some others, we had some Nadi astrologers come. And the one Nadi astrologer from Karnataka. And though, of course, I'm not supposed to say all the things that he said, I have been telling people one thing that he did said and hope that it comes true. And he said, within 3 years, you will build a Devi temple. And someone will give you some land or a building, and there'll be a good community support, and you'll build this Devi temple. He didn't tell me where. I think it's in New York. And but he didn't know anything about my past. Like, I never mentioned what I did or it's like out of the blue. He just said, and this will happen. So I'm seeing, we'll wait and
Right.
see what happens for another 2 years, whether or not that happens.
It'll probably happen very soon. What a
Well,
wonderful,
that was 1 year ago, so we have 2 more years left.
right. So 1 year to build the temple, and after that, all the pranapatishtha and all the pujas. So it's going to happen soon, most probably. But what a story, Ediji. That's beautiful. Do you think that if you went now to your, like when you go back and you realize that from the Saguna journey that you've had for so many years, is it a way for Bhagavan, your Ishta Devata, Anjaneya or Ganesh ji right now, it's a way of taking you to the next level, so to speak, to the Nirguna perhaps, you know? Do you think, has it occurred to you, maybe that's what it is, this oneness that we're talking about, that this was the path that you had to go on in the times when you were sad that you had to lose the temple? Do you think that was where it's leading or no?
Oh, well, that's a very nice thought. That's a very nice thought. That maybe it was a sign to me to not be too attached to form. And thank you for bringing that up. You know, when I learned the Ganapati Atharva Shirsha in Mysore, this was in 1996 or 7, from a Sanskrit teacher who was helping me with the translation. And he didn't want to teach it to me, even though I wanted to learn it, because he said, you're not a Brahmin, so I can't teach it to you. And he had a family astrologer who was a wandering family astrologer. And one day when I was there for a translation class, his astrologer showed up, and they haven't seen the astrologer in like 3 or 4 years. And so he introduced me, and we were talking, and the Jyotish said, tell me your birthday, I just want to do your chart, and I want to see if you are going to awaken Kundalini Shakti from your yoga practice. And I said, absolutely, I would love to know that. And so he did my chart, and he read through it, and he said, well, I can't tell if that's going to happen, and he looked at Chandrasekhar, and he said, but you should teach him the Ganapati Atharva Shirsha. And so that was really cool. And so what Chandrasekhar said to me was, he said, you know, in this worship of Ganesha that you're doing, you just always have to remember that the deity is nothing more than and everything of a manifestation of your own heart, manifestation of your own love for the divine. And that's what the deity is. It's not an object. And so in answer to your question, that's a really nice question. Maybe that was a sign for me to let go of the attachment to form a little bit. I'm going to think about that. But I definitely know that within Shankaracharya's tradition, that the worship of Saguna is supposed to lead you towards Nirguna. And that should be the final realization, that there is no attainment of Brahman, because Brahman is our own nature already. So there is no attaining to it.
True.
It's only the letting go of everything that it is not.
Beautifully put. And then we can worship Saguna and still have the Nirguna. So we don't have to let go of one or the other, because it's all one, like we've, discovered.
Exactly.
Especially beauty, that, the symmetry and the beauty. So Ediji, that was so beautiful. And you also said that you try to bring in music and art into what you teach and you do, especially in terms of yoga. So is there something that you want to share on that front?
Well, yeah, sure. Music and art have been important to me since I was a teenager. I used to play in punk rock bands, and I've always been a huge fan of music, all types of music. And art was the direction I thought I was going to go. I thought I was going to be an artist and go to art school. I ended up going to India and becoming a yoga teacher instead. And one thing that India filled in for me with not being an artist, and especially with ritual, was the aesthetics. The aesthetics of worship and of music in India is tremendously rich tradition. So I think that's how I filled in the gap a little bit with my desire to create things in an artistic way. In our yoga school, where we had built this beautiful temple, every 2 years I would paint it a different color. I would rotate the pictures and have new paintings done. Like once we had 43 paintings done, one for each verse of the Hanuman Chalisa, and they're gouache on cardboard. They were done by a calendar painter in Mumbai. It took 3 years to paint them. And so we had those decorating the schools, and we would do gold leafing details and all sorts of stuff everywhere. So the yoga school became my canvas. And everyone came to expect that every once in a while they'd walk in and the place would be pink. Or, they'd walk in, the whole thing was orange. And that was my expression. But music as well is, and I listen to a very wide range of music. I listen to Carnatic music, I listen to Hindustani music, I still listen to punk rock, I listen to, my brain was wired listening to David Bowie, basically, all of the synapses of my brain from the time I was 13 till 20 probably were wired completely to David Bowie. So the last book I wrote, I basically wrote it, even though it was on yoga, listening to David Bowie and Nick Cave. So I like, anything that has some sort of harmony or rhythm or emotion or especially mood. I will use it and I'll listen to it. I don't play music in yoga classes. You can't really listen to music and do yoga at the same time. Not if you're really doing yoga, because you're aware internally. So yoga can be nice for helping you to relax and let the mind be calm, but you can't really do those two things at the same time.
So before we open the floor for questions by others, my last question to you would be, and I'm really curious, you did mention that the difference between yoga now today and what it was in your time when you went into yoga, and also that I see Shivananda yoga Paddhati is very different because there's a lot of Bhakti, Pooja and all that, but in other studios, people don't want to associate with whatever is Hindu aspect of it. Where do you stand in all this, and how do your students take this aspect of yoga?
Well, I try not to be too judgmental or too critical. I know that even when I started doing yoga, the format that it was being taught in and the way that it was being done, maybe if someone from 100 years earlier or 40 or 50 years earlier looked at what I was doing, they could say, that's not yoga. What are they doing? So there's always this feeling of how we first did it was the way it should be, or the older we get, the better we were. And so that's a dangerous position to be in, because the world is always changing. Today I was reading a really nice article by, I can't remember the gentleman's name, but it was basically on Shankaracharya's viewpoints on samadhi and how he has examined samadhi in his texts that are existent, that are attributed to Shankaracharya. And because the word samadhi is not really mentioned very much in the Upanishads. The word yoga appears in Katha Upanishad, but the word samadhi isn't really there. We have samahita and samatana, and those have a little bit of a different meaning. And in Brahma Sutras, which I studied under a teacher named Sham Ranganathan, who lives in Canada, the word samadhi appears, but it's not given a preferential treatment as something which is desirable to attain. Shankaracharya likens samadhi to be the same as sleep, that it's a state you can go into, which is a very quiet, pacified, collected state of mind, but then when you emerge from it, you're back to where you were before. So maybe there might not really be that deep level of transformation. And so comparing samadhi and sleep on the same level isn't where we have it at the level where Patanjali treats it. So you follow this entire journey through with how the word samadhi has been treated. And it's only in yoga also in general, because Shankaracharya didn't agree with all of the facets of yoga that were existing at that time. There were certain ones like yama and niyama. He recognized you need this moral basis, and asana wasn't treated all that much anywhere, and pranayama, but these were all preparatory things for the mind. So, but in much later treatments of Vedanta, like over the past 100 years, especially since the time of Vivekananda, there's a much more prevalent, and you could go back a few hundred years before Vivekananda also, the teachings of yoga start to become more intermixed in the Vedantic teachings as well. So there's like this little bit of osmosis where at Shankaracharya's times, at least according to what seems to be in the text, there's not the same treatment of yoga that there is within Vedanta now. The treatment of yoga is very different, but it's a treatment of yoga which is very Advaita Vedanta influenced. It's not influenced by Sankhya, which is what it was influenced by around between 200 to 400 AD. So there's this little bit of, there's change, acceptance, and everything. And one thing about samadhi also that is seems to be glossed over a lot is that the goal of Patanjali Yoga is not samadhi. The goal is kaivalya. And samadhi is really only treated in chapter 1, samadhi pada, and then it's treated again in chapter 3 in the vibhuti pada as samyama, as the cognitive blending of your awareness with objects that you then take on the power or knowledge of. But in the 4th chapter, the Kaivalya Pada, we don't hear about samadhi at all. We hear about what's the ultimate realization is when the gunas have no more job to do, and they go back into the primordial oneness of nature, into the equilibrium, and then the self remains as the self alone, completely unmixed with the movement of the gunas, and that's Kaivalya. The self remains as pure consciousness alone. So samadhi is not the goal. Samadhi is one of the tools useful to preparing the mind for kaivalya. And even in the modern yoga circles, that's skipped over a lot. People think that samadhi is the ultimate thing to attain. It's not. It's just one of the tools. It's a hard one to attain, and it's very useful for the mind, but that's not the last stop. So this kind of a treatment, anyway, going back to Shankara's view on yoga, that when we look at how yoga is being done now with core power yoga and vinyasa yoga and all these different types of yoga, I hesitate to say they're not yoga because people who are doing them think they're doing yoga. And what I question is, if you think that you're doing yoga, does that mean that you might be? Because if your mind is getting calmer, if your emotions are getting more under control, if you feel more connected to yourself, if you have a sense of meaning and purpose in your life, if you're grounded in your own being from doing this, then you are getting some peripheral benefits that yoga has to give. And another reason why I hesitate to be too critical of some of these things is because I myself, practicing Ashtanga yoga, have not come anywhere close to attaining the culmination of yoga. I haven't experienced samadhi. I haven't experienced kaivalya. I still am like a super regular materialistic person living in New York City who has an iPhone and still listens to David Bowie, and I like nice clothes. So, and I have an apartment that I really like. And so, yeah, I'm like attached to objects. And so I know like yoga is important for me and worship is important for me because it reminds me every day that there's something beyond me, but I'm not living beyond me in that space right now. So it would be hypocritical of me to say I'm doing real yoga and what I was doing in the 1980s was real yoga, but what you cats are doing now is bogus, man. That would be totally hypocritical. So now, but I do think that since I live in the yoga ecosystem, it's very important that within whatever ecosystem you live in, that you need to sometimes be critical of the way things are done within your, within that ecosystem. And so there are things that are not good about the yoga world right now. And those things I think need to be looked at. 200-hour teacher trainings, 100-hour teacher trainings might not be the best way to put a lot of teachers out into the yoga ecosystem. Now, when I took the Shivananda teacher training, it was a 1-month training, 7 days a week. Sunday was a half day, roughly 8 hours a day to 10 hours a day of classes. That means in a 1-month period, we actually only did a 200-hour training. And when we came out from that training, we thought that we were ready to teach yoga. I had no idea what it meant to be a yoga teacher. And it took basically 10 years, literally, until I realized I know nothing at all about what I'm doing. Absolutely nothing. And then it took another 10 years for me to start to figure out what maybe I should be thinking about doing while I was teaching yoga and how I needed to search and go deeper. So it really took about 20 years until I started knowing this is the limit of what I understand, and all I can teach is my own experience. Now, I'm not suggesting that that's going to be everyone's experience. Patabi Joyce said that we should practice yoga between 6 to 10 years before we start teaching.
Wow.
Okay, so that's a lot longer than 200 hours. Now, there might be a happy medium. Maybe 3 years is a good medium that we should think about. I know you could become a physical trainer in less time than that. But I do think that we are short selling the marketplace by making it too easy to become a yoga teacher, even though yoga teachers are learning great things in these trainings. And then organizations set themselves up, like, without naming names, Yoga Alliance, but to sort of, put a stamp of approval on 200-hour trainings. Now they're trying, of course, to do good work. But again, this is something that might, begin to weaken the field a little. And so now I don't have anything to say about standards or certifications. I think that when it comes to yoga, we're not thinking about standards or certifications. We're thinking about the readiness of a student who has studied with a teacher who can guide them for a long enough period until the teacher says, you're ready to teach some people, and start with 1 or 2 people and see how it goes. This is very much in line with the Hindu tradition, where time is taken to develop someone as they become a teacher. This other model that we're doing now in the West is a very Western model. Pump them out, collect the cash, give them something to do. I do think it's good that people are doing yoga. I think it's wonderful that so many people in so many different countries are doing yoga. It doesn't seem to me that because there are a lot of yoga teachers that millions of people all over the place are getting hurt or doing bad yoga. So it seems to be relatively safe. I just would caution, think about quality. And that's a hard thing to do when it comes to economical models. So those are some of my feelings on yoga in the West right now. I think yoga is a good thing. I think it's good so many people are doing it. I think it's wonderful there's so many people teaching it. But I think that we just have to be a little bit wary of the economical models or economic models that we're creating through the teacher training programs, because teacher training programs sustain yoga schools. That's how a lot of people pay the rent. It's hard to pay the rent through teaching yoga classes, but teacher trainings get a lot of cash in the door, and that keeps schools afloat. And so we need to have a careful balance between that. I don't teach teacher training, so I can take the high road. And
Thank you for being so humble and so candid. That was beautiful. I'll just open it up for questions from others.
Can I make?
Yes, Haryana.
Eddie, hi. I am Hari Kiran. I'm founder of Advaita Academy, and thank you very much for this fascinating insights that you have given us. I just wanted to, like how you have mentioned, I also don't have very strong view against what's happening world over, not just in the West, even in some parts of India, other places. That's natural evolution. So I frankly, we can't, I mean, digestion or appropriation or all these are all evolutionary aspects that we need to recognize. But what I believe is that we need to realize what is in our hands and what we can do to offer authentic courses. So one of the things that we are doing as a part of our work is to come up with a program called Yoga Charya program, which is not your 200, 300, 500 kind of a thing, but it would be a residential program, and from Sanskritam to Sutras. So it would encompass everything. It would have kirtans, it would have chanting, It would have, like how Shivananda, they have fused, it would have elements of Bhagavad Gita. And therefore, what would happen, and Ayurveda. So what would happen is that instead of just an asana kind of a yoga teacher, you would have a more complete teacher. In a way, we would have an eddy. So we would be creating more eddies. So I would actually love to to I can actually clone you. Otherwise, I had the option of doing this Yogacharya program. We are planning to launch this December for about 20-25 people. So let us see. That's what we're trying to do. Bring back authenticity, bring back the immersive element, and bring back the transformative elements in the yoga world. That's what we're trying to do.
That sounds amazing. I would love to come take that course. It sounds fabulous. You know, I'd like to add one thing also to what I said, and this is something I believe very strongly, is that I think that and I'm only going to speak for America, I think that we are growing up. I think that we got yoga really young, and, you know, like a shiny new toy, a lot of people did a whole bunch of things with that shiny new toy to experiment and play around with it. And but a lot of the people who have been doing yoga here for some time, and people who are new entering into it as well, they're quite serious about it. And I think that as a whole, our community is growing and evolving, and we're learning and we're getting more serious. And I think that if we encourage that kind of attitude, you know, in another 15 or 20 years or so, we'll have really serious yoga scholars. We already have a handful of very serious yoga scholars in America. We know about, you know, Georg Feuerstein was here, and David Frawley, Dr. Robert Swoboda, and Robert Moses. And there are a lot of very serious yoga scholars. And I think we're going to have many, many, many more of them. So I think we're in a growing phase right now, which is one of the reasons why I'm not judgmental about it, but I am critical about keeping our course going towards consciousness and higher consciousness, and not just towards handstands.
In fact, if I look at humanity as a whole, a 7 billion population, I would say, I mean, I'm just guessing here, but maybe about 300 million mankind are into some form of yoga, right? So that's the kind of a number that you can safely say all over the world, and of which I would say, to me, that itself is it's a significant number, and that kind of a number would reach a crucial point. That's one thing that I'm expecting that in our lifetimes, a sort of a tipping point. And then there is a great move in the millennial generation right now for authenticity. That's a very independent trend that has come about, that there's too much of superficialization of everything, not just yoga. Everything is you know, done at a superficial level. So now there's people have realized that this is not it. You need to go deeper. And that quest for authenticity is a very big trend that I can see. And if we just tap into that and offer authentic courses ourselves, then you can see in 10, 20 years time, you will see that. You will see the transformation. I'm very sanguine about it.
Yeah, totally agreed. Totally agreed. Well, I look forward to hearing more about your course.
Yeah.
Let's see if we have more questions. So there's a question about what, in your experience, are the qualities or traits for readiness to learn the real yoga and Vedanta, Eddie?
Oh, well, I think, you know, there's a desire to learn yoga is all you need. I think that at whatever level your desire is probably the teachers that you'll end up studying with. And then you'll continue from there. Of course, you know, in Advaita Vedanta, you have the 4 qualifications that allow a student to be ready to study Vedanta. Thank God in yoga, it's not so severe. In yoga, all you have to do is have the desire to want to go learn some yoga. And I think that's all. It doesn't have to be a lot. You could do a yoga class once or twice a week. If that's all you feel that you need in your life, then maybe it increases, maybe it doesn't. Maybe yoga for you is meditation. Maybe it's chanting mantras. And so right now, yoga in the West and also in India as well is very Hatha yoga centric. And as you know, Hatha yoga is a very later development in this long-ranging dialogue of yoga, which has been happening for thousands of years. So it would be interesting to see if the prevalent idea we have of yoga begins to expand a little. So when we think of mantras, we think, yes, mantra yoga, just chanting it is a yoga, or they're simply meditating, or simply doing pranayama, or simply doing service, or worship. That these are all yogas, because what are they doing? While you're doing them, you need to be able to keep your mind present with the activity, with your devotion, with your mantra, with your pranayama, or with your body. So all those different levels of keeping your awareness resting in the one place you want it to be, depending on your adhikara or your eligibility or the desire you have to be fulfilled in one of these different ways. Maybe it's through music. That's also a type of yoga. I would say that let's broaden this definition of what yoga is. It's not just asanas and pranayama, and it's not just meditation. Let's broaden this definition, and at the same time, the qualification and the necessity is only the desire to do it. And that's said in Katha Upanishad also. It said, not by much hearing or learning or by much strength can the self be gained. The self is gained by the self who desires to know the self.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Eri. That was fabulous. Really enjoyed having you here and listening to your stories. All the best for your Devi temple, and I'm sure it'll happen soon, and we can all come there. And then I'll bring Swamiji again for a talk there, and I'll come and see you when I'm in New York next. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, and congratulations on an amazing festival. I've gone through the website, watched so many videos. It's super tremendous. So well done, and thank you for having me.
Thank you, Ji. And you wanted to watch Janet Cleary Ji's video. She taught at the Integral Yoga in New York City.
Ah, amazing. Super.
In 78 or sometime then. So
amazing.
yeah, you have a connect there. Thank you so much. Om.
Good.